It seems that everybody wants to build muscle while getting ripped. And I understand, changing your body is an emotional issue. You want your body to change and you want it to change right now. Now, when it comes to having a better looking body, you really have two main components. You have the fat level and the muscle level. So if you want to look better, you want to increase muscle mass while decreasing fat mass. So the question we often have is it possible to do both at the same time? Well, in theory, yes it is, and it is possible in some specific situation. For example, when you're working with a beginner. With the beginner, it is possible to accomplish both at the same time because the training is so novel that the adaptive response is a lot stronger. That's what we call beginner gains. A beginner can do really bad, stupid training and still gain muscle just because his body is super responsive. Now, even on a caloric deficit, which is required to lose fat, right? You cannot lose fat if you are not on a relative caloric deficit. So even on a caloric deficit, a beginner will be able to build muscle because his body is so responsive. Another situation where that can be possible is if someone has been eating a surplus, but eating a surplus of mostly shit food. Very low protein level, high level of transformed food with sugar, trans fatty acids, stuff like that. Really bad nutrition overall, especially with the low protein level. If you put that person on, let's say that they are eating 3,000 calories a day with 75 grams of protein. Well, and you decrease their intake so that they have a slight deficit, let's say 2,200 calories, but they are now eating 200 grams of protein, they might be able to build some muscle because they are receiving more building blocks and they were in a relative protein deficit before. Now the nutrition goes from eating shit to eating nutritious food. Even if they are on a deficit, their body can probably extract those calories. The bacteria in your gut can probably extract those calories better and utilize them better when trying to build muscle and repair tissue and recover. So in that case, going from eating crap to eating very good food and with a high protein, even at a lower caloric intake, you can still probably build muscle. But other than that, it's going to be really hard, if not impossible, naturally, to build a significant amount of muscle while also losing a large amount of fat. It will always be more efficient to focus on one goal than both at the same time. So focus on fat loss, and then while maintaining muscle or maybe increasing it slightly. And when the fat has been lost, you can focus on building muscle again while minimizing fat gain. It will always be more efficient to focus on one of the two goals. And when you have accomplished a level you feel satisfied, then you focus on the second one. You should still train really hard, trying to get stronger, trying to build muscle on a caloric deficit. You might just not be able to build a large amount of muscle tissue. That doesn't mean you should train any less hard. Now, the reason why it's harder to build muscle in a caloric deficit, first of all, well, if you have less nutrients, well, you might not have everything that's needed to fuel the muscle growth process, right? Muscle doesn't just require protein. Muscle is made of protein. You also need energy to fuel all the machinery that will build the muscle tissue. There's also the fact that when you are in a caloric deficit, cortisol level tends to be slightly higher because you need to mobilize more energy. And cortisol makes it a lot harder to build muscle tissue. Also, when you are in a caloric deficit, you will increase something called AMPK. And AMPK decreases the activation of mTOR. What I just said is probably Chinese to most of you, right? But what you need to understand is that mTOR is the light switch that activates protein synthesis. Protein synthesis is building muscle. So if I inhibit mTOR, I'm inhibiting muscle growth. So the release of AMPK when you are in a caloric deficit can greatly reduce muscle building process. That's why it's hard to do both losing fat, which requires a caloric deficit, and building muscle. because of the lower mTOR activation. The more you eat, the more you activate mTOR, the higher the protein synthesis is. That's why bodybuilders of old always divided their year in bulking and fat loss period. I'm not a big fan of bulking, but to build muscle and strength optimally, you do need to be in a caloric surplus. It will be possible to do both at the same time if you are a beginner, if you go from shitty eating to eating perfectly, but eating less food, or if you are like on the fine line, like you are consuming on one day like a 200 caloric surplus, on the next day a 200 calories deficit, then surplus, then deficit, always surfing the line between slight deficit and slight surplus, but that will be a very slow, tedious, and complex, precise process. It's always better to focus on one main goal, minimizing the negative impact on the other one, and then when you achieve your goal, switch direction. That will give you a lot better results. Some people think, well, yeah, but I want to be lean and muscular right now. I want to do both at the same time. Well, you know what? By focusing on both at the same time, you probably won't achieve a good level in any one of these two goals. It's always better to focus on one. When it's accomplished, focus on the other one. It will save you a lot of headaches, and in the long run, it will give you a lot better results. Which one should you focus on? Well, of course, it depends on your own body. Like if you look at Anthony Campbell that we used as a model before, Anthony was like minus 2% body fat when he was born. I don't think he was ever fat one day in his life. So for him, focusing on fat loss would probably not be a great investment. He should focus more on building his calves up, right? But if you have someone like me, well, I was fat when I was a kid. Well, if I try to gain, then I might get too fat. So if someone has like 15, 20% body fat, well, it's probably better to get them lean first. Because if you focus on building up as much as possible, and let's say they gain 2% body fat in the process, well, if they have never dieted down before, if they have never been lean before, how do you know they will be able to diet off the extra fat they gain while trying to build muscle? You don't. It's always better to prove that you can get lean and then build your body from a leaner frame. It will always give you better results. Okay, you're 15% body fat. Yeah, I want to bulk. I want to be bigger. Yeah, okay, now build up to 20% body fat. Oh yeah, I want to be bigger. Yeah, you have your 25% body fat, but you have no idea if you can diet down for more than 1 week. Then you end up a perma bulker. Like the big guy who wears 5 shirts in the gym to look big because I take a lot of space. Yeah, but you will never get lean because you never were able to know if you could be lean before. And once you reach a body fat level that's so high that you have for a year's worth of dieting, then you won't be able to do it. It's always better to start on a leaner frame. Not necessarily ripped frame, but a leaner frame. Unless, of course, you have no muscle to start with. So it's always individual case which one you should focus on. But always focus one goal and focus all your efforts on it, and then minimize the negative impact on the other goal.